لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين ونستغفره ونؤمن به وتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما كان جواب قومه إلا أن قالوا أخرجوهم من قريتكم إنهم أناس يتطهرون. It's a very important story in the Quran that's very relevant to our times. And I hope to address or explain the story in details perhaps next week. But today I just want to focus on one statement mentioned in the story that's very much showing us something that happened in the past that's happening now. This is the story of Prophet Lut alayhi salam and his da'wah to his people. And the very interesting statement in Surah Al-A'raf where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates to us that when the Prophet Lut alayhi salam called his people towards morality, towards chastity, towards living a righteous lifestyle, their response, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كَانَ جَوَابَ قَوْمِهِ إِلَّا أَنْ قَالُوا, that the response of his people was only to say, أَخْرِجُوهُم مِّن قَرْيَتِكُمْ, kick them out of your lands. Kick them out of your lands. إِنَّهُمْ أُنَاسُ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ, because these people want to be clean. Kick these people out of your lands because they want to be chaste, they want to be good, they want to be clean. And so, what's interesting about this verse is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, in the past, when immorality became normalized, people would be expelled from their lands for wanting to be moral. When immodesty and shamelessness became the norm, what happens in the minds of people is that they begin to see good as evil and evil as good. And so they want to kick out those who call towards righteousness and goodness. Now this message is very relevant to our times, because Muslims today feel this pressure. We live in a very difficult point in history in terms of morality. It's strange because in terms of science and technology, this ummah or this world is at a high point. But when it comes to morals and ethics and manners and family, this ummah is at a very, very low point. And this world is at a very, very low point. And the global culture around us is pushing ideologies on us that are extremely dangerous to society. And these ideologies, 20 years ago, they were calling for us to accept them, to tolerate them. Now they are calling upon us to celebrate them, to be part of them. And if you don't follow these ideologies, then they want you to get out. They don't want you to be clean. They don't want you to be pure. They don't want you to call towards righteousness. So today, I want to just focus on one principle of our religion that needs to be made very clear. And that principle is our stance towards morality and righteous conduct in this area. You see, one of the questions that keep coming towards Muslims from non-Muslims is, why don't you just change with the times? Like, this is the question we get. Everybody else is doing it. Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, the majority of people who follow these religions, they've changed with the times. They've changed their religion to suit the times. That if their book says something is haram and the Times is saying it's halal, They do a flip and they change what the scripture says. They move away from their religion. Not all of them, but enough for it to have become the global norm. And this pressure is now on the Muslims, that you are the only people who don't want to change. You're the only people who are holding firmly to a 1,400-year-old book, a 1,400-year-old law. Why don't you just change with the times? So there's many ways to tackle this. But the first point I want everyone to consider, especially those who are younger and who think that this global culture is like a good culture and it's, something to aspire towards. I want you to think about this point. This point is that the global culture and their concept of what is moral and immoral, what is good and evil, it has no basis. It has no basis at all. There is absolutely no basic guidelines that they have in determining what is good and evil. Rather, it is something that is changing all the times based on the whims of people. And you just have to look at what was considered good and evil 5 years ago and compare it to today, and you realize we can't keep up. You can't keep up what even they think is good and evil. There are so many people in their own culture who 10 years ago would post something on social media that was considered acceptable, and within the next 10 years they decide this is now immoral, and they will cancel that person for something they posted in the past. Because they have no moral basis. You see, in Islam, when people ask us how do we know what is good and evil, we have a very simple answer. Our Creator told us what is good and evil. If Allah has declared something to be good, then it is good. And if Allah has declared something to be evil, then it is evil. But in this modern culture, if you ask people what is the basis of what is good and evil, you will get 1,000 different answers. You will get those who say it's what people agree upon. You'll get those who say it's that which makes us feel nice. You'll get those people who say there is no baseline for good and evil because we just, in their view, evolved apes. So they don't think there's any such thing as good and evil. So in such a culture, why is it that we are being called upon to agree to their ideas when their ideas have no basis? Why is it that we are the ones who have to change when our ideas come from revelation? Our ideas come from what Allah has revealed. Our ideas come from the morals that Allah has clearly mentioned in the Quran. And theirs just comes from whatever is the flavor of the day. It just comes from whatever is popular today. And that will change tomorrow. And it will change the year after that. And it is forever changing. That really what is considered good and evil in the modern world is forever changing. Because they don't have a basis. You see, in the past, it was quite simple. Christians followed Christian morality. Muslims followed Muslim morality. Jews followed Jewish morality. Today, it's a free-for-all. Today, it's just you decide what's good. You follow your own truth. You make your own truth. Which is total nonsense. Truth is truth. There is no own truth. Right? But this is the world we have come to. So to answer the question, why can't Islam just change? Why can't Muslims just change their religion with the times? We need to be very clear that when we talk about our religion, there's different levels. There is the foundations of our religion, and then there are the secondary matters of our religion. The foundations of our religion can never be changed because these are divine instructions. This is what Allah has revealed to us. And what Allah has revealed, you cannot go against. You can't say in the future Allah was wrong. That's blasphemous. Right? You can't say that, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was wrong. That takes you out of the fold of Islam. Rather, what Allah has revealed to His Prophet ﷺ in the Quran and Sunnah, what is clear, what is agreed upon, can never change. And these include our beliefs, like our belief in Allah and the angels and the books and the last day and destiny. These can never change. You can't come in the future and say, people today think angels are fairy tales, so we're not going to believe in angels anymore. You can't do that. That is kufr. It's the same with the 5 pillars of Islam. You can't come today and say, praying 5 times a day is inconvenient. Let's shorten it to 4 or 3 prayers a day. You can't do that. This is kufr. This is out of the fold of Islam. This is changing what Allah has made explicit. And it's the same with our morality. The moral foundations of Islam are explicitly mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah. You cannot change them to suit the times. You cannot say, we're living in a zina culture, so zina is fine. You cannot say that alcohol is normalized, so let's drink alcohol. You cannot change things which are fundamentally part of our moral system. The only area where Islam allows some change are in secondary matters that are based on secondary principles of fiqh. So for example, if there's a law in your madhab based on culture, and the culture changes, then the ulama can change that law based on a change in culture. Not the average person, the ulama. Right? Likewise, if there is an opinion in fiqh based on someone's understanding of the hadith, and a different scholar comes with another opinion based on his understanding of the hadith, that's fine. Our religion allows that much of change, where in the secondary matters, the ulama make it based on valid ijtihad. But we are not allowed to change that which is clear and that which is agreed upon. And we have to be very clear about this with our youth. Many people are unaware of just how deep this brainwashing goes with the younger generation. Many of us who are older, we take these things for granted. We were raised with very clear understandings that zina is haram, and a man to marry to a man is haram, and a woman to be with a woman is haram. We grew up with a clear understanding of this. It's as clear as day to us, because when we were young, there was no difference of opinion on this, right? But the younger generation, if you are not monitoring what they are exposed to, with every movie, with every cartoon, with every video game, with every social media discussion, they are being bombarded over and over again with the message that these things are good. And we are not countering that, if we are not making the Islamic stance clear to them, then their moral compass can be eroded over time. And so it is the duty of every parent, every teacher, and every community leader to have these discussions with your youth. And you have to have the discussions at a very young age. Sometimes as young as 10 or 9, because they're exposed to these things at a very young age. And you have to be very clear about what Islam teaches on these things. One of the moral foundations of Islam is the preservation of family. Right? This is from the 5 fundamentals of our morality. The preservation of life, religion, family, intellect, and wealth. And the part of the preservation of family, the very fundamentals of the preservation of family, is that any kind of intimate relationship outside of marriage is not allowed. And marriage is only between a man and a woman. And a marriage between a man and a woman, that leads to children. And those children keep, that cycle continues as we go along. That's how we grow as a ummah, and that's how we prevent our extinction. And these things have to be made clear from a young age. That in our religion, these ideas that you are seeing today in the media, they are haram. These type of relationships you are seeing in the media, they are haram. And no matter how much the media portrays it as something to be celebrated, something to be proud of, something that's good, it's not. It's not good. And there are many, many evils that come from it. Some of them we are already seeing. Some of them we may only see in the future. So to conclude, as Muslims, we have to be clear that in our religion, yes, there is some allowance to change secondary laws based on the usul al-fiqh. But our moral foundations, our primary laws, our aqidah, these things are set in stone. You can't change these things to suit the times. You have to follow, you have to submit, even if you're the only person left in your entire community that does so. Even if you are a lone voice in a sea of darkness, you have to remain firm upon what is right and what is wrong. You have to be, those people who call towards good and forbid evil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, you are the best of nations to be brought out for mankind because you call to evil and because you call to good and you forbid evil and you believe in Allah. Allah says one of the reasons we are the best of nations is that we call towards what is good and we forbid evil. And if we let go of those qualities because we want to fit in, because we want to be like everybody else, because we don't want to be from those who are kicked out because they are pure, then we lose that quality of being the best of nations. And we slowly head down the chart. So we ask Allah to grant us firmness, to grant us the ability to remain firm on Islamic morals no matter how much the world is changing. We ask Allah to save this world from itself and to guide this world back to morality and chastity and good conduct. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعد أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. One of the arguments that people make today is that there's no harm in all this. Right? That's their argument. Why are you policing other people's relationships? There's no harm that comes from what other people are doing. Right? This is the argument that if two men are romantically involved, it doesn't harm you. This is their argument that there is no harm, and this is wrong. This is wrong. There is a lot of harm that has come to society and that will come to society from the direction that humanity is heading in. Allah only prohibits something if it is harmful. This is something we have to be clear about. Every single thing that is explicitly stated as haram in the Quran and Sunnah, it is haram because it is harmful to society. Now, sometimes you know the harm and sometimes you don't. What happens with society is they adopt a harmful practice, and 50 years later they look back and realize it caused a lot of harm, and they say, oh, we shouldn't have done that. Do we really want to go down that road? Do we want to let all these things happen, and in 50 or 100 years' time, our descendants look back and say, this generation messed up? Why did they allow that to happen? Because sometimes you can't see the harm when it's happening in front of your eyes. It's only visible when somebody looks back historically and say, why did those people even do that? Why did they even allow that? Why did they even tolerate that? So there are a lot of harms that come from these kind of lifestyles. And I just want to mention a few which are already happening, which are quite evident to those who look at the world and realize what's going on. And number one is the breakdown of family. Number one is the breakdown of family. Just 50 years ago, we know how strong family ties were across the globe in every culture. And now we are living in a disaster situation where 50% of marriages end in divorce. And half of our youth don't want to get married. And many young people say they don't want to get married, they don't want to have children, because it's all about themselves, it's all about their nafs, it's all about their freedom, it's all about what they want. We have people saying things like, I don't want to get married, it gets in the way of my freedom. I won't be able to do what I want. We have people saying, I don't want to have children that will get in the way of my freedom. I won't be able to do what I want. This has become the worship of the self, where life's all about me and myself and I, and nothing else matters. And again, some people will think, oh, okay, so that's his business. Leave him alone. But if it's one or two people in a community who don't want to get married, that's fine. Islam doesn't make marriage compulsory on every person. But when this becomes the global culture, where everybody doesn't want to get married, and if they are getting married, they're ending up in divorce, or they're not having children because they think children are inconvenience, this has a ripple effect across the entire globe. And one of those effects we are seeing today, that's starting to worry even the non-Muslims, is a decrease in population. Let me give you an idea of how this works, right? So you have one generation that say, oh, children are an inconvenience. I'm only going to have 2 children, right? So they have 2 children. Those 2 children grow up and they say, oh, marriage is an inconvenience. I'm not getting married. What do you think is going to happen to their family within 100 years? Their family is extinct. Their family no longer exists. This is happening to thousands of families around the globe. You will meet many people who will say they are the last member of their family. They are the last member of their family. And that same person has no intention to get married, no intention to have children. Their families are going extinct. And again, people don't realize this because this is not in the news. And all of these ills of our time are contributing to this, because we know biologically, if people are engaged in this evil of a man with a man or a woman with a woman, they're not going to have children, right? They are immediately cutting off the continuation of their lineage. And if they are not doing that, but they live in the zina culture, where they're going around committing zina, they're not going to get married, they're not going to have children, or if they do have children, it's going to be out of zina, and they're not going to take the responsibilities for them. So we see the breakdown of family. And now we have a generation who are scared to get married, or who don't want to get married, or who dislike marriage. Then we see the decrease in population. That literally many communities around the world, their population is decreasing at an alarming rate because people are not getting married and people are not having children. On top of that, we see even more harm in the spread of diseases. And Rasulullah ﷺ warned us about this when he said that when immorality becomes normal, you will see the spread of diseases that your forefathers never heard about. And every 5 years, there's a new disease that pops up. And very often, it's linked to these evil practices. Then we have the confusion that children are growing up in. You see, in Islam, we go back to our primary principle, the preservation of family. And all of these things link up to the preservation of family. In Islam, zina is haram and marriage is recommended and in some cases compulsory because of the preservation of lineage. Children know who their fathers are. They know who their mothers are. They grow up in a stable home with a mother and father. They grow up with a strong family circle of their grandparents and their uncles and aunts and their cousins and their older siblings and their younger siblings. They grow up in a family. They grow up in a healthy environment. This helps them to grow into the best versions of themselves. But when you have people living a life of zina, and a child grows up not even knowing who his or her father is, or they grow up even more confused because they have two mothers or two fathers instead of the proper natural way, then those children grow up confused. And those children grow up with a lot of mental problems. So we are seeing also with this, the rise of suicide amongst children and teenagers. Something that was unheard of 100 years ago. The amount of depression and suicidal thoughts amongst children and teenagers today, it's something that was unheard of 100 years ago. Now, what is society doing that is making life so miserable for young people that they want to take their own lives? And we see this also, with the mindset of the young people coming up. In the past, a young man between the age of 15 and 20 would be excited about life. They would be looking forward to life. They'd be looking forward to getting a job, getting married, having children of their own. Now, you find many of them are depressed. Many of them have a very negative outlook on life. They're like, what's the point of life? Why am I even here? Why did my parents even give birth to me? I didn't want to be on this earth. They have this very negative attitude towards the world. Where did all of this come from? It comes from this culture that the world has created. All these things together, they create this culture where people don't even want to live anymore. You see, in the past, a young man, his aspiration would be to be a good husband, a good father, to work hard, to have a family. The current generation of young men don't have anything to aspire towards. They don't, because they don't even know what a man is anymore. That this fitna has gotten so out of hand that now they're changing the definitions of what is a man and what is a woman. And that continues with the confusion of that generation and the psychological harm to that generation. And this, by the way, has other long-term consequences. Because if you have a generation growing up where the men are not real men and the women are not real women, what happens if that generation has to go to war? What happens if that generation has to defend themselves? Last year we had a very difficult situation here, and our men showed their real worth when they stood up and defended our neighborhoods. But what happens if that generation passes away, and if the next generation are a bunch of girly boys who can't protect their families? This is all a consequence of this culture that is growing around us. And we have to understand the long-term consequences of these actions. So no, these are not harmless actions. This is not someone's private affair where you can say that, it's his business, not mine. Rather, these ideas that are being propagated throughout the world, they are dangerous to society. They are destroying families, they are destroying civilizations, they have very negative long-term repercussions, many of which we haven't discovered yet. And we're only going to see those repercussions in 10, 20, 30 years' time when this entire generation has been destroyed by that culture. We shouldn't wait for that. If Allah has made something haram, we must reject it completely and we must stand up for what we believe in. I end with a reminder to us that when doing da'wah to others, we must maintain wisdom and gentle preaching. Yes, this topic makes us angry. And this topic, it boils our blood. And sometimes our guys, they want to go online and they want to have very vulgar arguments with people on this topic. And being vulgar doesn't convince people of anything. It doesn't soften people's heart towards you. Islam teaches us, no matter what the other person is doing in terms of sins, when you are doing da'wah to people, you have to be kind. You have to be gentle. You have to be merciful. Now, being kind and gentle doesn't mean you tell them they're right. It doesn't mean you pretend the problem doesn't exist. No, you are clear about what you believe, but you gently guide them towards what you believe. You gently explain to them why the lifestyle they have chosen is bad for them in the long term, and why Islam is a better way of life. This is what we need to do. So yes, around us we're going to meet people of all kinds of lifestyles and all kinds of sins. Be good to them, because your kindness and your wisdom and your mercy is a da'wah to them. But at the same time, be clear about what you believe and call them towards that. Let them know that there is a better way to live your life. And that is the way of submission to the Creator, a way of obedience to the Creator, a way of Islamic morality. That anyone who chooses this way will have a happier life, a more content life, and they will see the benefits of this in this world and the next. So when it comes to our communities, be very clear in teaching the youth what is halal and haram in this area and why it is haram. And when it comes to dealing with non-Muslims who may be engaged in these lifestyles, be kind and merciful to them in your dawah, but at the same time give them dawah. Don't allow them to think that that way of life is a good way of life. It's not. It's something that's going to harm them. And our dawah comes from a place of wanting what's best for them. And that's why we call them away from these lifestyles towards the straight path. We ask Allah to make us from those who are rightly guided and who guide others. We ask Allah to keep our youth firm upon the iman and upon the morality. We ask Allah to end these fitnas that are spreading across the globe and to return humanity to the fitrah when it comes to morality and relationships. اللهم اجعلنا هاديا مهديا اللهم اجعلنا هاديا مهديا اللهم اجعلنا هاديا مهديا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.